Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the BlazerMetrics Podcast. Brand new name. Ditched the Wash City Podcast. We're officially known as BlazerMetrics now. Wanted to go with something that was a little bit more analytical. I'm Nate Bishop, and I am joined once again by Larry TB Pup. Welcome again, Larry.
Good to be here. Axzilla, your gift card is in an envelope. It's not in the mail yet, but it'll be on its way.
Yeah, thanks, Hack. You didn't exactly provide the name, but you provide the inspiration, which is
There we go.
good enough.
And that's what I told you.
Good enough.
I think someone called BS on that, and I'm not sure why.
I was mediocre, man. I don't know. I don't think he.
If they didn't like the name, they didn't think I was going to send him something. Who knows?
Well, I don't know. I mentioned in the first post we were going to have a poll, but I didn't really want to leave it up to the fans. We found something we liked, so it was like I'm just gonna go with what we got. So we just finished our final. I don't know what you call it. Our final summer league game before the playoffs. We don't know yet if we're going to be in the playoffs. I think
we need some help. I think we need Utah to lose, and Keontae George is out. So
yeah, that helps.
maybe. I mean, we're 6 dumb seconds away from just being in.
Yeah. Well, we also have from what I understand, one of the worst point differentials because all of the games were very close. So
except for this one.
Except for this one, yeah. Although they burned some of the points off there at the end, which did not really help our cause. So, yeah, I think if they don't make it, whatever. It's not. Honestly, if Sharp doesn't play and Scoot doesn't play, I don't know how much I really care about this last game.
True.
So, we'll see. I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on Summer League because we played 4 games now. I want to start like Shaden Sharp. What was your impression of Sharp in 4 games?
When he really decided to play, he wasn't bad. He really needs to, as athletic as he is and as pretty as his shot can look like sometimes, he really needs to work on his handle. He struggles navigating traffic. If he's in a straight line going to the basket, his athleticism takes over and he can elevate and create a lot of problems. But when he's up against someone trying to beat someone off with a dribble, he really struggles. He loses control of the ball quite a bit. He's not really creating much of an advantage. So I hope that's something he really works on between now and fall camp. That would probably be my biggest takeaway from him. He looked a little bored at times, which I don't blame him. You know, when he did get on a roll at times, there wasn't a lot people could do with him if he got open shots or got going to the basket. But his handle, if he can get his handle, he's going to get better, easier shots, and that's going to help him, develop a rhythm, I think, a little more quickly. But right now that's not there.
Yeah, it's interesting because his shot really was not falling all summer league. I mean, his percentages were really bad. I haven't pulled up his stats for all 4 games, but overall, just really didn't shoot the ball very well. And the handle is definitely a significant issue. He just seems like he has a lot of trouble. Like if he's already going downhill, he can get by people. Like you said, the athleticism takes over, and he is pretty quick once he's going. But if he's at like a dead stop, he doesn't have Scoot's burst. Like he can't just like take a step and be by his man. And
well, I think he might be able to if he had more confidence in his handle, but he knows that that's not there, so I think he's having to hold back in taking off.
Yeah.
So that's the way it seems to me. Jabari Walker continued to do just more veteran type things.
Yeah.
Baji had a good game, and I really watched in this game to see, because there's been a lot of, he has not rebounded well, but he is either blocking, and he never gets credit for all his blocks. He hasn't one time yet this summer league, I don't think. But he's either blocking or he alters a lot of shots that people are having to get up a lot higher to go over, or you see him having to chase out on 3-point shooters And he ends up, 20 feet from the basket because no one rotated over. And I
Yeah.
must have seen that a half dozen times where he's running out. And so it's not an excuse for having no rebound. Now, tonight was his best rebounding night. I think he had 7, 3 blocks, 6 points. It was better and seemed like maybe he's playing a little more confident. But you'd like to see that get better. But I can see why he doesn't get a lot of rebounds, especially on the defensive end, because he's chasing blocks. It's the job of guys coming behind him to pick those up because he's out challenging a shot or picking up someone else's man. So that's part of it. That's not all of it. But I really tried to watch that tonight. And the rest was, Murray looks okay at times. He's really, other than just being a spot up shooter, I'm not sure what he does much yet. Now, they haven't asked him to or put him in positions to do much more than that. So maybe he can. We just haven't seen much of it. I saw more of that in college. It's tough without Scoot being there. I mean, you miss his energy. You had to love the interview he gave. It took her, I don't know how long to get through what should have been a 2-minute interview because he kept cheering from the sidelines and talking up his teammates and talking to the refs. He was having a great time, just full of energy. Players are going to like that on the court.
He's always talking, even because they posted a clip of him mic'd up in the first game, and he's just talking. He's talking all the time. And you know what? It's weird. He reminds me a lot of, and this is really, I was alive for Magic Johnson, but I was very young for Magic Johnson. So I didn't really get to watch much of him. But like the way that Magic Johnson was portrayed in the TV show Winning Time, that's what Scoot reminds me of. Just like happy-go-lucky, talking all the time, big smiles, just like, yeah, like that's who he reminds me of. Magic Johnson, but maybe not even the real Magic, but just the TV show Magic. That's who he reminds me of. So it's just kind of funny. I was really hoping to get to see more of him. I know it's Summer League. I know it's silly, but, it's like we don't have much else to look forward to right now. Sharp, to me...
it sucks that 2 years in a row it's been the same injury by halftime. I mean,
yeah,
both years. Like, well, that stinks. Now it sounds like I don't know. Sounds like it's pretty minor. But then I read somebody said somewhere, and I don't even know where this came from, that he might miss training camp. And I don't even know where I saw that, but somebody had. I don't know if it was a requote of a tweet or I don't know where it was, but somebody had mentioned that. So I hadn't heard that. I don't know where that came from.
I haven't heard that. And honestly, the team didn't even officially release anything saying he was out for the rest of summer camp. I looked.
Right.
They have their PR Twitter account, and that account released the statement that he was going to be out for the Spurs game and that he was going to be day-to-day. And then they haven't said anything else since then.
But you haven't seen results of that MRI yet saying, hey, it's negative or it's... So that always makes me a little nervous, when you don't get, something confirming that it's nothing. That it's
why would they do that? That's so weird,
strain
though.
Or soreness. So I don't know. That part, anytime you don't get those results... I'm a Yankee fan, and as soon as they didn't release stuff for Aaron Judge, I'm like, oh, yeah, this is worse than they're saying. And they're like, oh, it's just a little bit. And then pretty soon it came out that it was worse than what they thought, which was fairly predictable because they hadn't. If it's good news, they're going to release. They're going, hey, nothing, everything was clean, just a slight sprain, day to day. That's not what they said. So
yeah, they never released anything really. Like usually they'll say like what the results of the MRI was, and the only thing
if it's good, they will. If it's not, they tend not. Now, who knows? Maybe they just didn't. We don't know, but typically, if it's good news, they'll come out and say that it's good news.
It's weird, though, because ESPN during the Charlotte game said that they spoke to Scoot, and he said the MRI came back clean. But that was like, it was like secondhand from, and it was not an actual official release from the team. So it was very weird. So I don't know.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. If he's saying that, then that's probably what it is.
Yeah, well, and they said day-to-day, and I just don't know what the incentive would be to lie. If it was something significant, like what happened with Sharp, where there was a partial tear, and they were like, concerned that they might need surgery, That came out. That was, the local reporters. I think Casey Holdall released that at the time. Haven't really seen much from Casey this time. I don't even know if he's down there.
Vacation.
Yeah, maybe. But so yeah, I guess we'll kind of just keep an eye on that. But I would think something would come out if it was more significant. I hadn't heard anything about him missing training camp. But I really think that most of the guys a little bit disappointed in Murray. I was hoping, because he's like 23. I was hoping that he would exhibit some, I don't want to say veteran, but like more like ready to play now, because when you draft a guy who's that old, you're hoping they're going to be able to contribute right away. I mean, that's essentially what they're hoping for with Jaime Jaquez, right, on the Heat. And if we eventually traded for him, the same thing. You're hoping that a guy like that is going to step in and actually be a part of the rotation. And I'm just, it's Summer League. I get it. I just would hope that a few more of those wide open shots would go in, because he was wide open a lot.
It was his shot. He looks, I don't know if he looks too squared up, almost too. A lot of good shooters have just a little bit of a tilt. Their shoulders are, one's maybe a little in front of the other, one foot's in front of the other just a little bit. He seems to be dead straight.
Yeah.
Feet are exactly parallel, waist, shoulders, everything. And so the shot tends to do that. Now the shot tends to be a little on the side. It's just a little different. There was somebody it reminded me of, and I had it the other day and I've forgotten, but it was like, oh, okay, this reminds me of this. Now, he shot decent in college, wasn't as good as his brother, I don't think. And hopefully that comes, maybe he's just, look, everyone has a little different level of confidence. Maybe some nerves. There shouldn't be. He is older. He's still 22. He'll be 23 in, I think, August or so. But I was hoping to see a little bit more too. Either ball creation, setting up a team. And not that he was bad. It was just maybe because of his age I wanted more. And yet, and Scoot looked like the far more mature player.
Yeah,
now
he's by far.
He's been playing against grown men too.
For 2 years.
Guys.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of it.
I mean, I was happy with what I saw from Jabari Walker. I mean, I think he could actually step into the rotation next year. He's not a glamorous player, but he rebounds, he defends. Yeah, he's a exactly.
He's got very good rebounding instincts.
And he's smart.
Defensive instincts. He's just smart. He makes smart plays. He's not going to embarrass you out there. He's not going to have a bunch of turnovers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you kind of get what you get with him. Tonight was kind of a little more of the same. I think DeVoe took most of the shots, and he's been fine. He's just filling a spot because Scoot isn't in there. I don't think he's any threat to make even the last three-way spot. But I did like seeing Baji get a few more rebounds, a couple buckets. Someone finally threw him a lob that was
decent,
catchable, and he just about tore the rim down. So that was nice to see. Even some of the shots he missed, he had a little mid-range, 12-footer. Rotation looks good. The form looked good. He missed this one. He hit one earlier. He doesn't shoot a lot from out there, but it's not a broken shot.
Rupert, that kid has no offensive game to speak of. I don't think he's hit a shot all summer league. Like, I really don't. He's missed every three, every jump shot, but his defense is fantastic. I mean, if they can give him the ability to even hit just a corner three, like if he can be a catch and shoot 3-point shooter, his defense is fantastic. I mean, you notice him right away on defense.
It's certainly not for lack of effort. He's got really long arms, and when he gets a little confidence or he knocks a ball loose, it just amps him up more. Then he goes after it even harder, and he's got such a wingspan. You could see him bothering some guys. You're right
Yeah.
on the offensive end. I mean, his handle when he gets into traffic is brutal.
Oh yeah.
And he's so predictable with that spin back, going one way about 2 dribbles and then spin back the other. I mean, anytime he got near the lane, that's what he did. He's not comfortable putting the ball down in traffic. But that's the thing with Sharp. He's more comfortable, but it's not very good. So these are young guys, still need to learn. But yeah, Rupert's really raw, really raw. I can see him spending a majority of the time in G League just to get floor time and get minutes, and then come over and practice with the big club.
Yeah, because he needs they I think he's a couple years away. I mean, I think they're gonna have to really work on his shot, his dribble. I mean, there's a lot of basically his entire offensive game. It just needs
and he will. His coach raved about how hard of a worker he was. He was the hardest worker that he'd ever had, and the coach is the owner of the club as well down there. And he listed off all the players that he'd had or that they had down there in the Australian League, and he said Roops works harder than any of them.
Yeah.
So that's good to hear. You like hearing that a guy is going to get in the gym and work his butt off, because he needs it.
Well,
so, fine.
This is why I wanted to bring back Thibault, because I'm just like, we are too raw. Like, so many of these guys, they're not ready for minutes, in the big show, and that's great. We've got a G League team that's just right across town. But, I look at Baji, I look at Rupert, even Murray might need to be spending time down there. And so I think Walker is going to get minutes. I actually would really like to see us pick up Reith. Like, I think, he could be a nice third center on the team.
Take Eubank's spot.
Yeah, I don't want him getting like significant time, but he rebounds, he's active, he can score, he passes. He's not a world beater, but I was pleasantly surprised.
He can shoot it a little bit. Well, and he should. He's I believe he's 27. I mean,
yeah.
he's been playing in pro leagues for a long time. He should be more developed and more mature, and he is absolutely what you see is what you get.
Yeah. He's not as good as Baji on defense, but he's not bad on defense.
No, and you notice the difference when Baji's out. They attack the rim a little more pretty easily. They get easier shots at the rim. They don't have to float him up as high. But Reith has better positioning defense. He reads things a little better off of a pick and roll. Certainly better rebounding position. Baji gets a little lazy or watching, and when he's not going for shots, because he goes for them so often, when he's not, he kind of just stands instead of going in and attacking the ball at its high point, which he would high point just about anybody with that reach. So there's things he needs to do. I mean, he's I think they called it on him maybe just once tonight, but he's illegal
all the time. Yeah, he just hangs out in the key. Yeah.
Well, I think he's used to a little different. I don't know what the rules are there as compared to Europe, but he's used to hanging out there, camp, just sealing off things, and he's got to get outside, a little more movement, get outside the lane, then jump back in, get back, or attack an offensive player, so he's not just standing there, because he's standing there a lot.
Just post it up. Yeah,
3-4 feet below the free throw line, just with his arms out, and there's no one near him.
Yeah.
That'll come. He needs time on the court, obviously. He was very raw going into this, but he has some skills that we don't have on the roster, so that's, I hope he can build on those.
Yeah, we need bigs.
We wait for tomorrow and then see where we have one more game. It's just whether it's a consolation or whether we're in a playoff.
Exactly. So I want to talk about the Heat offer, but really the last thing I want to say about Summer League is I was surprised, but also not surprised that Shaedon played all the games, because you could just tell in the first couple games he's not ready. Like, he's a 20-year-old kid who has a ton of talent, but he needs reps, and he's, I think people that have penciled him in as the starting shooting guard next year, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be Scoot and Simons, and I think maybe they'll put Sharp at the 3, but I think more likely than not he'll be the backup, and then they'll play Simons as the backup point guard. But I don't know if he's ready for it,
Yeah, and if Scoot doesn't get hurt, I wonder if he plays more than a couple of games. But when Scoot went out, they kind of had a hole, and they needed him to play, or it was probably gonna get ugly pretty quickly, and they weren't gonna get much out of it. So I wasn't surprised when they got that massive lead at halftime. I just I doubt we see him in the second half, and he did.
Yeah, he was done.
Never came back in, which was fine. He didn't need to.
Yeah.
But so we'll see if the playoffs, if they're not in the playoffs, they just have a consolation game. I doubt you see him. They'll just run out all the second and third string guys for the most part. If they're in the playoffs, he'll probably come back. Scoot's going to probably lobby to come back if he's available to.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yep. All right. Well, yeah, why don't we go ahead and jump into... There was some not leaked, but there was reports of kind of really the first reports of what supposedly Miami is offering. And
which is really just rehashed of what other people have said of what Cronin said he wanted. So
it was there's nothing groundbreaking. It was basically, and I don't remember who posted this, but it was like Tyler Hero, 3 first-round picks, and 1 of their young players, whether that was Jovic or Jaquez. So not, we're not entirely sure where the 3 picks comes from. I mean, they have 2028, 2030. So I'm guessing that means that they would unprotect their pick to Oklahoma City so that Oklahoma City would have 2026. And then we would get 2024. So it sounds like the offer...
Well, it wouldn't... I don't know that they would unprotect. I think they would just guarantee 2026 because the protection is on 25.
Yeah.
That's what keeps 24 and 26 from being traded because you can't trade, have 2 in a row. So that is affecting 24 and 26.
Yeah.
So you can't... I mean, you have to just guarantee them 26 and say, hey, we're not going to trade you 25. We'll just give you 26. That would undo 24. Giving them 25 means you can't trade 24 or 26 still. So that I don't see how that they don't have 3 picks. I know 3 picks has been reported. I have still not seen any protection removed, and it wouldn't actually be removed. It would just be, okay, we'll just give you 26 instead of possibly 26 because 25 is protected. So that until that comes off of there's 2 picks. I don't know how they get to 3.
No, and then there was rumors that supposedly Detroit was a possible landing spot for Hero. I don't see it. I'm not sure what. First of all, they've got 1 million guards. I mean, they're in the same boat we're in. Why would they want Tyler Hero? Because they've got. They just drafted one of the Thompson twins, who's technically a guard.
Yeah, he'll probably play small forward. But you got Cunningham, you've got Ivy, you've got. I think there's another.
Yeah, there's another one, and I'm not.
There's another one there.
Not remembering, but yeah.
So that's not. I mean, Detroit. The only way I can see Detroit being something that you would go, okay, maybe, is if. Oh, they got a whole bunch of guys on 1-year deals. Alex Burks is in the backcourt there. Ivy. Oh, Killian Hayes.
Killian Hayes is
he's the other one really. So, it would be if we could get a draft pick out of them. Mm-hmm. Because one of their draft picks would be certainly more attractive than a Heat pick. So I went back and people saying, well, if they're far enough out, maybe Dame's older, Butler's older, or they're gone. Adebayo's the only one left if he's still there. But with or without those guys, LeBron coming and going, Dwayne Wade coming and going, Shaq being there for a little bit, coming and going. Only twice since the year 2000 have the Miami Heat had a record worse than Portland's was just this last year. Two times. That's it.
Yeah.
They are a very well-run organization. They're not going to have bad draft picks. It's not likely. Not as long as Spo and Riles are there. So their draft picks, even if there are two and they're a ways away, those are likely to be in the 20s. You want something, and even if you get a third one from them, big deal. If you get the 24 pick, that's going to be worse than 20s. That's going to probably be 25 on down. So you need something from whatever you can get for Hero. And if that's if it's to Detroit and we could get a pick out of that, that wouldn't be bad. If it was to Utah and we could get one of those Minnesota picks, I can't imagine Ainge is going to throw one of those in for Hero, but that's what you would want. Brooklyn, if you could get one of their picks, that would be great. They'd really like to unload Simons. I mean, that's Simmons. I don't know, is that worth an extra pick? If you could get a pick for Hero and one for taking on Simmons, now, you're 4, maybe 5 picks, and Simmons and one of Jovic, Jaquez, maybe.
I'm just not I'm not impressed with Jovic and Jaquez really at all. Like, I don't see it. Like, it's not like getting a Bridges or a Markkanen or, there's nobody. I guess Hero is supposed to be the player that's of that ilk, right? Like, he's your centerpiece, and we don't want him.
Hero would help out Utah.
Yeah.
And if we could get, I think Hendricks just signed. He's been hurt. He hasn't played in Summer League, but I guess he just signed. It looks like he did. I thought he had been unsigned here till just maybe as of today, but it looks like he signed. He'd be a guy I'd be interested in, as a young player, and you would treat that as a pick. I mean, it wouldn't be a future pick, but that's a first-round pick from this year. So you could treat that as a pick. They need guard help. They have very little in their backcourt to offset some of the other things that they've got up front. So I think he would fit in really well with Utah. It's just, what could you get back? I mean, they got Collins up front. They have Sexton back there. And they do have Sexton and Clarkson in the backcourt, but I've heard they might want to move one of those guys. You got Collin and Markkanen, and oh man, there's a bunch of guys up front. Walker Kessler, Sensabaugh. They've got a good young front court. They don't have really a shooter. Agbaji is supposed to be their shooter. He's going to have to come in and do that.
I just wonder, I don't know. I've been having this thought in the back of my head, is it better to just hold on to Hero and try to trade Simons? Hero's 6'5",
you're not getting much for either one of them.
No, I know, but I just see Hero as being somebody that is going to be better at the 2 than Simons. Simons is 6'3". It's like...
Yeah, well, and I could see that if you could get, okay, if it's still a 3-way and Hero came here and Simons went out, or whatever that pick was, I'd be fine with that.
I just don't know. I honestly haven't watched enough of Hero. I hardly ever watch the Heat, so it's like I don't really have the context on him. And
what's odd is they got better when he got hurt.
Yeah. He's not a very good defender. I mean, that's the thing. Neither Hero or Simons are good defenders. They're basically very similar players.
Well, except that Simons is way more athletic, and Hero has an actual negative, which is almost unheard of in the NBA.
Wingspan.
A negative wingspan.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's T-Rex arms. It's who was it? Jared Bayless that had a really short wingspan back in the day. T-Rex.
Yep.
So that's, I don't know, a little better rebounder, similar assists, points. They shoot the ball. Neither one of them play defense. He does have a little more height, but he has much less of a wingspan. So
yeah,
either one, whatever you could get for either one of them, fine.
They're just not
I guess.
exciting. Like it's not exciting.
There's no young player yet that is like, okay, this guy could potentially be something. And these picks are all so poor that you're drafting down in the where you got Simons and where you got Little and not that occasionally you can't find a gem down there. Simons turned out to be, well, pretty good for where he was drafted. At least he's been good for parts of seasons when he's been given run. Dame's a guy going out. You got to have a chance of something. And so far right now it's a whole bunch of something that's not very good for something that's really good. I mean, it's way out of balance. Just because you have a whole bunch of stuff on one side and one thing on the other. Well, this is a Ferrari and you got 7 or 8 Yugos over here. It doesn't balance out just because you got a whole bunch of it.
That's why I'm just wondering, like, if it's not better to take the draft capital that you get from Miami and try to turn that into somebody, useful. Do you go after OG and say, okay, Toronto, here's a bunch of first rounders.
Yeah, but it's still the first rounders are bad first rounders, and they know that just as well as anybody else. You want something that's. I mean, that's what made Ainge's move so great. Not only did he get all those picks from Minnesota and shipped off, a guy that had been schemed out of the playoffs a couple of years in a row with a huge contract. He got picks from a franchise that's notoriously bad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was just highway robbery.
That's like my favorite trade to point to. If somebody's like, "Oh, you're just, you're nobody. You're just on a forum. These are real professional GMs," and you're like, "Yeah, a real professional GM made that trade." I mean, that's the thing. Like, these people are not infallible. They make stupid decisions.
Listen, Minnesota GMs. What was the year they drafted like 3 point guards? That was a real professional GM that did that.
Wasn't that Hollinger?
No, I thought it was a guy from Portland.
Well, Hollinger is from Portland, isn't he?
No, but
Or no, not Hollinger. I know who you're talking about though.
He was a guy. He was like, I don't know if he started as a sportscaster.
Yeah. Yep. Kahn.
David Kahn.
David Kahn. That's who it was.
He was.
He was Mr. He drafted Rubio and Flynn and like somebody else. But yeah, it was like back-to-back point guards in the lottery. It was he had like
it wasn't good.
Yeah, it was really bad.
Not good. And I've got a really good friend that lives in Minneapolis, just outside, and it's like why
it's
can't
depressing.
We
yeah, it's depressing.
Well, but back to this, whether it was Fentress reporting, what somebody else reported, what Joe Cronin said, it's still not good. I mean, if you can get 4 picks and a couple young players and filler, fine. So far, none of this stuff. Miami doesn't have good young players. I actually wouldn't, like I said before, I wouldn't mind Robinson, but now he's locked up for 6 months. So if that's what we're going to get, it's going to be pretty underwhelming. It's just going to be a bunch of dreck for a really good player. Where every other player that's gone, I mean, Phoenix gave up a bunch of picks, but they gave up 2 young wings with a ton of potential that were starter or top 7 guys. That those were good players. There's nothing Miami's giving you that's anywhere close to that.
Well, so are we waiting then for for Dame to open up his list, or because that's what I'm not. It's like, okay, it sounds like maybe Riley is lowballing, which is hilarious because if they push all their chips in, it's still not that good.
Yeah, and that's the thing. He could push everything in he's got, and it's still going to be a low ball offer. It's not worth that much. It is low future picks and players who are just not. I mean, Hawkes was slotted to be, a mid-second round guy, and Miami took him early. Now maybe they see some, maybe he becomes something, but that's not. You're looking for somebody who's got a little more. He is what he is. He's 22.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, that's nice. something with a little more potential. So Riles, I don't know whether he's holding on to assets. He didn't. He could give them all. There's not that much there. That's why when Dame did this, we talked about that. It artificially depressed the market for what Portland could get back. And at some point, if it does become, all right, Brooklyn, I don't know why Brooklyn would really, it's not the right timeline, but if they did, or Boston did, or, and even with that, probably a three-way, I don't know if Brown comes here, if that's what you want, because 1 year, is he going to agree to an extension? I mean, there's a lot of ifs with that. But if there's some other teams that get involved in the whole, there's 8 Eastern Conference teams that could benefit greatly from Lillard. There's no one over there that's that, other than Milwaukee when they're healthy. Milwaukee when they're healthy is the best team. But Giannis got hurt, so you've got all, Miami and New York and, Toronto thinks they've got a shot. And there's a lot of teams over there like, well, hey, if we got these breaks, we could have been there too. Dame helps a ton of those teams. So hopefully it gets opened up and hopefully that's what Joe's waiting for, because even if they unprotected the pick, gave you 3 picks, traded Hero out to get a 4th, and you got one or even both of Jaquez and Jovic, there's nothing there. There's no one from those 6 pieces that would be a starter anytime in the next probably 3 to 5 years, and you're hoping that Jovic and Jaquez maybe develop into your number 5 starter. It's just nothing great.
Well, I mean, I've been talking Boston for months. Even before all this happened, I thought Dame going to Boston, Brown. I don't want Brown. I don't think he really fits the timeline. I don't think he would re-sign here. I think you send him to Houston or you send him to Oklahoma City. You say, hey, these are a couple teams that could really use him. I think Oklahoma City would be amazing for him. They already have SGA. They've got a bunch of young guys. They're kind of knocking on the door of the playoffs. You put Brown there, and they've got 2 legitimate all-NBA players on that team, and they can start competing. They can start making a push. So I would love to get him and send him to someplace like Houston or OKC or even San Antonio. But one of these teams that have a ton of picks, that are...
OKC would be great because they have like a third of the picks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you put him with Brown with SGA and Holmgren and Giddey and...
Well, I want one of those guys. I mean, that's the thing. They don't get to have him just for picks. I want somebody. You got to give us somebody.
I doubt you're not getting Holmgren. Maybe you could get Giddey. You should be able to get Giddey in a pick. I mean, that for Brown? Yes.
Well, I would hope more than one, right? I mean, we're talking about an all-NBA guy. You got to get at least what Utah got for Mitchell. You got to get at least 3 good picks and, a decent young player. And so, I mean, the thing is, you might not get the 4 or 5 picks we're hoping to get from Miami, but at the same time, you're going to get better picks. You're going to get picks that are actually useful and hopefully a young player that you can actually put into your rotation right away. So
that would be one fun, exciting team if he went there.
Yeah. So, all right. We're at about 38 minutes. I mostly the last topic I really wanted to ask you about was, and Joe Cronin kind of talked about this. He was like, "Hey, I'm kind of I pushed pause, right? I pushed pause on everything. So he's not pursuing free agents. He's not pursuing trades, outside of Dame. So it's like, what do we do if this drags on? Like if it drags on to almost training camp, maybe September." What do they do? Do they just go into next year with everybody they've still got, Nurk, and just kind of like say, well, whatever we have, and just put a team out there, or do they, it's like we're just stuck in limbo right now. We haven't signed anybody. We lost Eubanks and Knox and Watford. So we've lost players, but we haven't brought anyone else in other than our draft picks. So it's like, what do we do if we're just waiting around for Dame?
I can't imagine Nurk is here. He either goes. I think he either goes in the Dame deal or another deal. Dallas is still looking for a center. I read something the other day that they took on Holmes as part of just filling a salary slot. They had extra room and they got some stuff back for that. But they don't like McGee. Holmes they don't consider a center. They've got Dwight Powell, but he starts but barely plays. And then they've got the rookie Lively, but they want something better and more veteran for Kyrie and Luka. So I don't know. Could he end up in Dallas? It just feels like maybe that might end up where there's some interest for him and you could get something back. I don't know what that would be. But Sacramento had to pay for someone to take Holmes. It's not like they wanted him. It was just, okay, you have cap space. This will allow us to renegotiate Sabonis's contract there. And they put that extra cap space that they got to use and shipped off Holmes, who hadn't been playing now for a while. So Dallas would still like a big man. I could see potentially Nurk going there. I have no idea what it would be for, how that would work, but I know they're still looking for something over there.
But if we send out Nurk, are we starting Baji? We don't have a center.
Well, maybe you get back. We don't. I mean, maybe you get back Lively out of that. And I mean, you're going to be really young. I mean, it's not like, well, okay, we need to bring in some veteran center. No, they're going to be young, and they're going to be. They're not going to win a lot of games. I don't know if they'll be quite as bad as everyone, or not everyone. A lot of people think they might be. Scoot plays hard, plays to win, and Ant's going to give you some points. Grant's going to give you some points. Thibel's going to do what he does. Who knows what you get off the bench, or if they sign, some bargain basement free agents. So it doesn't really matter whether Nurk's here or not, because if Nurk's here without Dame, what's that going to look like?
It's going to be bad. I don't want him on the team.
It's just going to be Mr. Pouty McPowderson, and you're going to get a half-assed effort on a lot of nights, like we already did, but I think it'll just be worse.
Yeah.
So I don't. If he's here, he's not here past the trade deadline. I can't imagine.
Yeah, I just don't.
It won't be Baji. Baji's not ready for that.
I can see. I mean, if they're desperate, Reith is going to be the starter, not Baji.
Yeah, Reith would start before Baji would. For sure.
I just don't. I don't know. I mean, the roster right now is really rough. We've got a lot of really young guys. I'm not sure who starts at small forward. Obviously, Grant is the power forward.
Probably Thibault.
That's where I would lean to. Is probably. I would not be surprised if the starting lineup is Scoot, Ant, Thibault, Grant, and if Nurk is still here, Nurk would be the starter.
Yeah. I think that's probably pretty close.
I know everybody wants to start Sharp, and if all things equal, does it really matter if Sharp doesn't? If he starts, it's like.
Well, the reason you might start Sharp is because you play him. I mean, I don't know how Ant would deal with this, but Ant comes off the bench, making more money than all of them. I mean, Ant's the second highest salary on the team now. So I don't see how he comes off the bench, but the only way I could see him doing that is like, well, you're coming in like 3 or 4 minutes because Sharp will go to the 3, you'll come into the 2, Thibault will sit for a little bit, then Thibault will come back in, Scoot will sit down, Ant goes to the point, Sharp goes back to the 2, Scoot comes back in, Sharp goes out. I mean, something like that, because who knows? Little's probably going to get some time. it seems like that. I hope he just plays at 3. They keep playing him at 4, and I swear that's how he gets injured every time.
Yeah.
He's going up against guys just too big. He shouldn't be going up against. And Walker. So I'd rather not see Sharp play a lot at small forward. He has an advantage, and a big athletic advantage at the 2. At the 3, it's going to be bigger guys knocking him around. More experienced guys. Small forward is maybe the best spot in the NBA for, whichever spot like Kawhi or Paul George, or, if Kevin Durant plays some there, or, pick one. Yeah. Tatum or Brown, or those are your really, really, really good players are at that 3 spot, and that would be tough for him.
I think Thibault's a good fit there just because he's such a good defender. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's gonna be a boring summer though. Until Dame is traded.
Well, it is until that happens. There's not going to be closure. There's not going to be much excitement for going forward because you still have this hangover effect of a guy who's been your team for the last 11 years, and then it still might take some time before people are like, hey, these young kids are really exciting. They're not going to be good, but we haven't been good for 4 years, so it's not like some fans treat this like Dame led us somewhere in sometime in the recent past, and it's just not been the case. I get he's a beloved player, but the team results have just not been anything good. It's why we've had to tank, because we were not good, and he got injured the 1 year. But we haven't been good, so saying we're not going to be good next year isn't really a departure from what we have been for some time.
Yeah, we were not good last year, even when he was healthy. I just, so I've heard a few different people in the media say, well, if Dame's still on the roster in training camp and in preseason, he's going to be the starting point guard. I just don't, there's no, first of all, if he plays, he could get hurt, and then you can't trade him. The Blazers aren't going to want to bring him back because you want Scoot to be the point guard. Some people were saying maybe Ant would start at point guard until Scoot earns it. No way. I don't believe that for a second. I think Scoot is going to be the clear-cut leader of the team. I just don't see it.
You don't draft someone at number 3 to have him come off the bench very often.
No, and I just don't think Ant's as good of a point guard. In terms of distributing and running the offense, and I think Lillard leaving is going to leave such a huge gaping hole in terms of leadership and just kind of driving the soul of the team. I don't know how else to put it. That. I have a feeling. The team is going to take on the personality of their best player, and I've heard a lot of reports that Dame really didn't put up with people complaining about minutes or complaining about shots or and he would kind of nip that in the bud. And with Lillard leaving, I think having somebody to step into that, even though he's only 19 years old, it's interesting. I was watching him today, and he, even from the bench, he was like, come on, Shaden, run. He was staying on him, from the bench. And I was like, I like that, get them moving, push these guys.
It will be interesting because when Dame was here, for the most part, they were at least in the playoffs or in the playoff hunt for a good, 8-9 year stretch.
Mm-hmm.
And so as the leader, it was easier for him to nip that in the bud. It's going to be tough for Scoot. One, he's coming into the league 3 years younger than Dame was when he came in. And Dame had an established veteran when he came in, of much more status than Grant,
mm-hmm.
So as the losses pile up, it'll be interesting to see how that gets handled in the locker room, because it is someone that's really young. They don't really have, Grant's a veteran age-wise, but he seems pretty quiet. I don't know how much he would speak up. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because the losses will start to mount up and people will start to get a little chippy, and that's a lot to ask of a kid that's 2 years away from being able to have a beer.
I I think, and maybe I'm completely off base, but I think the team is going to surprise people because
Surprised to what level?
So, as much fun as it was to watch Dame and CJ, although not as much fun to watch CJ, their style of play was not team basketball. It was, I'm going to jack up 30-foot shots. And when I'm hitting them, it's some of the most fun basketball you can watch. Dame coming down and just lighting it up. But he didn't play defense. And he was, even though I would say he was not a bad distributor, it was definitely not his first priority. And
right. He's a score first point guard who can distribute. And a lot of point guards are these days. I mean, that's just how they grow up out of high school AAU ball, some of the different circuits that they get on. Scoot has a little more natural playmaking ability to him from what I've seen. But surprising, when you say surprising in terms of style of play that can be a little more enjoyable at times, although there's going to be a bunch of turnovers.
No.
Or surprising in terms of they might hit 30 wins.
I think that the style of basketball that Chauncey Billups wants to play is not the style of basketball that Damian Lillard wanted to play. And
it
and when Chauncey has guys out on the floor that play his style, which is up-tempo, hard defense, passing the ball movement, we've won games. I mean, when we weren't really supposed to be winning games, and so are we going to make the playoffs? No. I'm not saying we're going to make the playoffs. I'm not saying we're going to even make the play-in, but I don't think we're going to be the worst team. I think Scoot and Shaden and maybe I don't know if I'm guessing Simons will be here, but assuming Thibault, Grant, I think if you put guys out there that'll buy into Chauncey's system and move the ball and play defense.
But they're still missing a big part of Chauncey's system, and that's a rim running big that can block shots.
Yes.
And so until they get that, they really can't play his system because they don't have that backline defender. They don't have that guy that's a lob threat. And so until they get that, would that be lively if Nurk went to the Mavs? I don't know that much about him. Watched him a little bit, little tape, some highlights, saw him play a few games. I don't know that much about him other than he's long, apparently can shoot a little bit, good wingspan. Is that the type of guy that might be the type of center that Chauncey wants? Because until you get that, it's still incomplete. You're missing 20% of what he wants, even if the other four guys are perfect.
I just wish we'd gotten Duren, honestly, instead of Grant, because Grant is a good player. I think that they will benefit from having him on the roster for however long he's on the roster, but he does not fit this timeline. And if we'd gotten Duren instead, he would have been perfect with Scoot and Shaden.
Well, I don't know how we're going to do that though, because the pick for Grant is in the future. It wasn't the possibility of getting Duren was if we'd gotten the Pelicans pick if they had missed the play-in.
Well, but they used our pick. So we sent them essentially the pick and the TPE that they used to bring back Kemba and Duren. So if we had done that, if instead of trading the TPE to Detroit and the pick to Detroit, if we'd used that TPE to get Kemba Walker, which is what they wanted to do, they were trying to get rid of Kemba. So if we had absorbed Kemba, we could have gotten Duren. So we wouldn't have gotten Grant, and Dame would have been pissed off a year early. But and he probably wouldn't have signed. Well, I'm totally guessing at this point. I don't know if he would have signed the extension that he did. But it is possible. In another alternate universe, we could have gotten Duren. Hindsight 2020. So I don't know. It's tough because we don't know how long it's going to take to move Dame, and until we know, it's so hard to shape the rest of the roster. I think this team is going to just be a mishmash of the old timeline, the new timeline.
there's definitely a hangover until it's done, and that's you want it to get done. Some people are talking like it's getting closer to being done, but I don't know if they're actually hearing anything or just repeating something that someone else heard. It's just a game of telephone, and it changes a little bit, and pretty soon, because I think Stephen A had something that's like, hey, we're within a week of getting this done, and I'm like, well, based on what? Based on the 3 picks that they still don't have. Okay.
Yeah.
When I see that, when I see a report that protection has been removed, maybe we're getting closer. Until it is, and all that does is give you the 24 picks, which will be crap. I don't know, and we still owe Chicago a pick.
Yeah. Yeah. At this point, it's just all. It's like you don't know how much of it's actually coming from Miami and how much of it's just smoke, because there's so much smoke right now from Dame's camp and from from the Blazers through back channels. You have ESPN that's kind of helping their former colleague out. It's just like you couldn't tell what's real at this point,
Well, you have an idea of where stuff is coming from depending on what's being said and who's saying it, because you know where they get most of their stuff from. But nothing has really changed in terms of details of what Portland wants. We all know what Miami has. That hasn't changed. Even if they remove protection from a pick, that doesn't make that pick good. It's going to be garbage. It's not. They're not good picks. They're late picks from a good, well-run franchise, and that's fine. That's not their fault. That's what they want to be, but it doesn't give you much value, and neither the players. I mean, they can hype Jovic all they want. He didn't play last year, because he wasn't good enough. In 1 year, playing some summer league ball and working on stuff is not going to make his feet faster, or make him defend better, or make him play inside of 20 feet.
Yeah, so, he doesn't look at all ready for regular minutes. I mean, I think he hits more shots than Murray. I think he's more ready than Murray is. But
well, he's got more well-rounded skills than Murray does.
Yeah, but
Murray
still,
right now just looks like a standstill corner shooter that, if that's what he's going to be, needs to hit a higher percentage of his shots.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, we're way early in this.
And that's the problem, though, is that if right now, the way the roster is constructed, the small forward position is probably going to be Thibault and Little. That's going to be your minutes, unless one of those guys has moved. But I don't think, definitely Rupert's not getting minutes. I don't think Murray's going to take minutes from there. There's been kind of discussion about whether or not Sharp is going to play small forward. I mean, I guess he could, but
I think they're fine with a three guard rotation. That's 30 plus minutes for all of them. That's fine for their age.
Yeah. So, but that's where Jaquez would be playing, is small forward. So you've got, and then power forward, you've got Grant, who's going to probably play at least 35 minutes a game. You got Jabari Walker, who I think is ready to take some minutes. I just don't see where. So you get Jovic and you get Jaquez. Let's say you assume you actually do get both of them. I don't think either one of them cracks the rotation on a bad young team. How depressing is that?
Exactly. That's why those those assets aren't great, because they certainly didn't play. Well, Jaquez just got drafted. They didn't play for Miami. And Miami had some injuries. They had guys. Guys had to step up. That's how Caleb Martin's like. Oh, Caleb Martin, he stepped up. He wasn't anything until that one run. He got hot, and that's great. But Robinson used to be good, and then he sucked, and Hero got hurt, and so you had guys stepping up, and Gabe Vincent, and great. Jovic wasn't one of those guys, so he couldn't play for a good team. Okay, fine. But if he comes here, I don't see where he's playing for a bad team, to your point. So how good of a prospect is he? I mean, he might get some run because we're down 15, 20 points. They just throw him in for a while, but he's not a rotational player. But I don't know that roster construction right now really matters. They're going to be getting a bunch of young guys out in the court and getting them experience. And having a few veterans to play with them, so it's just not an absolute train wreck. You don't want what Houston was the last couple of years, or what OKC was for quite a while, where it's all young guys.
Yeah.
You know, you needed some veterans there to help guide and direct and hold some guys accountable, hold them in line, and but roster construction, I think that's a ways down the road till they get to. They just want to see what they have right now.
Well, and I've heard that the next draft is just terrible. So it's like,
it's supposed to be, although there will be by next year, there'll be some international player that played better that we hadn't heard of, and I mean that's just where the game's going right now.
Is there anybody that Jim has kind of pointed to as being?
No, although he's already started. He's like, it looks like I better start in the draft.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, we got nothing else to look at.
He told me about a couple of guys he looked at, and he isn't overly impressed, but we'll see. Now, sometimes he nails these guys over a year ahead of time. Scotty Barnes, he had him before anyone had even heard of him. He's like, oh yeah, this guy's going to be it, and he slowly started coming up. Even he was second round for a while, then late first, mid first, ended up being drafted, even a few spots above what he finally ended up at. But Jim was high on him like a year and a half, like out of high school. He's like, oh, this guy, wherever he goes. All right. So he'll probably do some of that earlier this year than normal, just because pretty likely we're not giving that draft pick next year to Chicago.
Yeah, probably not. Well, we're just at an hour. This is probably a good point to stop. And there's not really a lot else to talk about right now. It's just kind of, I honestly just don't even want to get into at this point the whole, like, did Joe Cronin lie? Is he, I'm so tired of that conversation.
Yeah. And it's past now. It's got to move forward. Regardless of what happened, it is what it is. Dame's going to get moved. Okay, where do we go from here?
Exactly.
And hopefully this iteration of the Blazers gets built a little better, or if you've got a small player that you could move for a big one, you do it earlier on instead of holding on to CJ for 8-9 years when you could have moved him a long time ago when he was coming off a most improved player season, gotten something for him on a cheap contract, and really helped the team. So hopefully they make those moves earlier, identify them better, and down the road, this can be a good roster. You have some pieces that are exciting, but you just don't know yet. You just have to get out and play.
Exactly. All right, Larry. Well, thank you for joining me again. I don't know. We'll kind of just have to play it by ear. Like, we'll see what happens with the last game of Summer League and if there's any other developments with Dame, but it's just kind of not much else to talk about right now. It's kind of just it's all been done. And lots of Dame stuff, and I don't know how the national media have prolonged this so much. There's just nothing new to talk about. Like, it's just kind of just the same conversation over and over and over again.
Well, and whoever is playing Utah tomorrow, go them.
Exactly. Phoenix, there we go.
Go Phoenix. I don't even know I have no idea who's even playing for them. Their draft picks are bad. I can't imagine they've got much on that roster, so that might be a tough game for Phoenix to win. But go Suns.
Go Suns. All right, Larry. Well, thanks again for joining me, and we will talk again soon.
All right, good night.
All right, good night. Thanks again for coming to the BlazerMetrics Podcast, everybody. Have a good one.